Okay, good afternoon, folks. Welcome. And we've got a substantive agenda, and it actually begins with a couple of in-camera items. So I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Councillor.
Well, it should come as no surprise that I have a pecuniary interest on number 5, the joint use agreement with Western University for conduit pathways. I won't be voting on that because my employer is Western University.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others? Okay. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to go in camera. We will be in camera for close to an hour. Okay. And it may be a little bit over. We'll deal with all of our in-camera business while we're there. And then we'll be back for lots of fun. Okay, motion to go in camera, please. I'll call that.
Carries 5-0.
Okay, folks, we'll go across the hall. Okay, folks, welcome back. With the indulgence of committee, I'd like to move to the additional business section to deal with the matter of a selection of one member of the Hydro Board of Directors due to the fact that Councillor Park does need to depart shortly. So if I could turn to that, and I will open the floor for a suggested process and or a nomination to that board based on the interviews that have occurred and the information that we have on the public record.
I'd like to suggest we have 4 candidates. We're looking to fill 1 vacancy. I think we should use a ranked ballot with all of the candidates and rank them and see who the most preferred person is.
My spidey sense says that the clerk might actually have a ranked ballot ready for us, so. Councillor Morgan.
I just want to clarify, at what point is the intent where if colleagues want to make a particular case or a suggestion based on the public applications, at what point are you expecting that we would do that? Would you expect us to rank first, then talk about it, or when we bring forward the potential nomination, or would you expect us to do that now?
My sense would be that now would be the time to do that before you complete your ballot. Or else the good persuasive arguments of your, that's why I asked the question, process or, would be somewhat mute. So I'm happy to hear from members of the committee at this moment on that prior to marking ballot. Go ahead, Councillor Morgan.
Oh, I said it, so I guess I should go first. I like the idea of a ranked ballot because the ranked ballot will determine the highest preference. And in my opinion, we have 4 very, very strong applicants here. And we had this problem last time, and we got a very good applicant out of the process. And I'm glad to see many of the same people on the ballot this time because they were excellent candidates last time. And I hope that regardless of the outcome of what we have today, that these names continue to be considered because they are very strong applicants for the Hydro Board for various different reasons. In my thinking, there were 2 candidates that I haven't finalized my exact ranking that ranked very high for me, and that was Mr. Holborn and Ms. Parks. I thought they both have excellent backgrounds that would be appropriate for the Hydro Board. I'll be ranking them in my top 2. I'm open to hear any thoughts from my colleagues before I finalize that ranking on what their thoughts were on what would be right for the Hydro Board today, recognizing that all of them would do an excellent job on our board.
Further comment? Councillor Usher.
Well, Mr. Chair, since we are going to this, then I think that I have to say my piece also. I think it's important, and I'm not going to keep silent because it will be shown in my ranking anyway. And I do feel that we did have some excellent candidates, and this is not unusual for an organization like Hydro. I think that all of these individuals responded in a very, very eloquent way, and each of them brings something unique to this interview, as well as they would bring something unique individually to Hydro. And it's almost unfair to try to rank them to pick one, but we have to do that. We have to select the person, and I'm going to do that. I rank mine according to how they responded, according to their qualifications, and like I said, each of them have some very unique qualifications. I hear my colleague called names, but I'm not going to call names. But so what I'm trying to say here is that I'm going according to the process of ranking them, but I want the public to know that despite the fact that if I had the opportunity to accept all 4, I would. And if it was 3 of them, it would be difficult. If it was 2, it would be difficult. If it's the fact that it is 1, it's even more difficult. So I just want you to know that I think they're highly qualified, and I'm just going to select 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much. So to let the committee know, of course, we've got 6 people and myself on the board now. Gabe Valente, Connie Graham, Jack Smith, who we appointed last year. Leaving our board this year is Mr. Peter Johnson. Scheduled to leave next year is Marilyn Sinclair and Mohan Mathur. So now, of course, we're looking for a replacement. I would consider slotting ahead of time those other 2 as well. That might be something to think about. I don't know if we're at liberty to do that, but that would be consideration I would make myself as well. I'm going to present a concern of mine just based on the skill sets of the board, and why I might suggest that for this year, Mr. Andrew Rymack might be an excellent choice, is that he's the one who brings the engineering background, because next year in this next 2 years, we're losing a great deal of experience. So someone with about 18 years, and then 2 with 12 years on the board, it's around that. But in terms of the engineering experience, next year, if our chair, Mr. Mather, goes, he has the engineering experience. I'm the only other one with engineering experience, and who knows what will happen to me in 2018. So we may be in a position where what is largely an engineering company will have someone with only a couple months experience in the board, and it'd be great if that person had an opportunity to become familiarized and maybe mentored by the previous chair. So that I'm speaking just in terms of that skill set. Although I of his skills, and there many of them have great skills that are very appropriate for it and could replace different people at different times. Mr. Rymack also was able to generate a new income stream for his department, which is something that our board is also looking at, because we now have that opportunity and in hydro utilities can look into other things. But my concern is mostly engineering, so I've expressed that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and once again, thank you for your diligence on the board on all of our behalf. Okay, anything further? All right, the clerk will, if you need a second, take it, and if not, clerk will collect your ballot.
I will have Ms. Saunders enter the rankings. However, I can tell you at this point in time that of the 5 members, 3 of whom have given a first ranking to Mr. Holborn, which is a majority of the members. So that would be the motion that's going to be forthcoming momentarily once we get it entered, so everyone can see what the results are.
I do, we'll wait until the clerk sort of does this, and so if someone wants to prepare a motion consistent with it, that would be wonderful. But I do hearken to the idea that, you know, we had 2 of the candidates who have been through this twice. I think we had a really good slate of candidates, and that was paring it down from, I don't remember what it was, like 14, I think, or something, initially down to 4 very good qualified. I think there is some value to the idea of saying, here's 4 candidates that, as you go forward would be qualified and, they could come back for ratification, if you will, rather than going through the whole process again in 12 months. So something to think about. I can take the motion now. They'll put the results up for us to see, but I know Councillor Park, I'd like you to have the opportunity to vote on this if we could. So would you like to move the motion? Okay. So the motion is Mr. Holbert.
Yes.
And I'll call the question on that matter.
Motion carries 5-0, and as you can see on the display is the results of the voting. As I indicated previously, you will see 3 number 1 rankings for Mr. Holborn.
All right, thank you very much. So let's move to the agenda, and we have several consent items. Does anyone want any of these 2, 3, 4, or 5 pulled? I understand you've got a conflict. Councillor Helmer?
4?
Yep, I figured as much. Was that yours as well, Councillor? I figured as much. Okay, let's call items number 2 and 3, and I need some clarification, if I may, from the clerk. At the last council meeting, we had an item that was very consistent with item number 3. Is it the same, is it different, or is it just congruent?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the motion that was approved at council was a notice of motion to allow me to proceed with the September 7th display of the flags prior to council approval. This is implementing that long-term through the council flag policy. So it's implementing what occurred at the last council meeting.
Okay, so it's congruent. Okay, I'll call items 2 and 3.
You're pulling 5?
And I'm calling items 2 and 3. And then I'll call item 4, and then we'll deal with item 5 separately. Councillor Morgan has a conflict on item 5. Councillor Usher, on 2 or 3?
I'm Councillor Helmer. I appreciate the compliment, but you call me Councillor Usher. So I'm going to support the annual meeting calendar, which is why I didn't pull it, but having just gone through the August and July breaks and then had these ginormous meetings, including a 10-hour planning meeting, it seems like an appropriate time to remind everyone that we pay for those breaks with these really overloaded agendas. Before and after we do that. I think that's something we're going to have to resolve. I don't want to do it now. I want to do it in the future, but it's a good time to mention it.
I think administration is aware that last night was not a great deal. So we got to figure out a different way of managing agendas. And okay, thank you. Call the question on what? Okay, Councillor, you already got it. So what do you want?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. albeit reluctantly. I just want to say through you, thank you to staff for continuing to move this forward, and it's a process. We have to get all of our ducks in a row, and we have 5 nations that we have to coordinate with, so it's good that we're moving this along. September 7th is coming up, and it's an important date in the history of London, so thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm calling the question on that.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, item number 4, Voices for Change. A very comprehensive report. Is there an introduction to this, or shall we just turn to committee? Okay, I'll just turn to committee. It was pulled by Councillor Helmer and Councillor Usher. I have some comments as well. Councillor Helmer.
Well, I'm certainly glad to receive the report and the recommendations. I think it's a great initiative to do the diversity census and to have these workshops to try and explore what some of the barriers are, especially facing women and racialized women from participating fully in our advisory boards and commissions, agencies, and so on. I was hoping that there'd be some kind of presentation or discussion from staff. I mean, this is quite a substantial piece. And I think it's important for not just us around the horseshoe to understand, which we have done by reading the reports, I'm sure, but also for the community to understand sort of where things stand, what the recommendations are. And I just wonder, even if very briefly, our staff could speak to some of the high level pieces.
And consistent with that, I'll turn to Ms. Graham, but I think I have some suggestions in my comments about how to go to the next level on this. Ms. Graham.
Certainly. So through the chair, and thank you for the committee's interest in this work. This report, as you know, and I apologize we don't have a formal presentation on the full report, but I can give a bit of a highlights reel if that's helpful. So this is a project where the City of London was selected as one of 5 municipalities in the country to work together to increase the participation of women in local government. London is the only one of those 5 municipalities, I would note, that also participated in the precursor program, which was the Head Start initiative. And so the city's got a longstanding history of being involved, and we've also have great councillor champions who participate in this work more broadly at FCM. And so this project is driven around one goal, which was locally identified and approved by council, which is to increase the participation of women from diverse backgrounds, that's FCM's language, or women who are racialized, on the City of London's advisory committees and the governance bodies of our boards and commissions. And so we are working with a local working group, which includes a number of city staff members, city councillors, and women from the community. And we've completed 3 pieces of work over the last year. The first one is to get a basic understanding of the participation of women today on these groups, and that's the census that's before you. And the main finding from that is that, exactly as we expected, that women from diverse backgrounds are underrepresented. Women from diverse backgrounds are about 8% of the London population and represent about 2% of participants in this group. Interesting, there are a lot of other findings that we've tried to highlight in the report that may be helpful for council and others involved in populating these groups going forward. One is that women actually aren't underrepresented on our advisory committees. We've got a great representation of women, and that may be a result of concerted efforts by the steering committee or the striking committee to do so, but they are underrepresented on the governance bodies of boards and commissions. And then there's a few other more detailed findings around, folks on these groups tend to be white, they tend to be very well educated, they tend to have lived in London for a long time, and so on. And so all of that's presented there. The second 2 pieces of work, number 2 was to conduct focus groups and understand barriers faced by women today. And again, that's provided in the report, and this includes a number of very specific recommendations around giving it really a diversity lens to everything from how we advertise these positions, how we recruit for them, and then ultimately what the role looks like when they're there. Those are presented in the report, and the direction that we're seeking is to give direction to staff to come back and identify what can be done. So again, this was put together by a working group that includes citizens, and then we turn it over to staff. And then the final piece is there were workshops conducted in London and in all of the other 4 municipalities that are part of this program. The workshops were a great success. We had a huge turnout in London, actually one of the largest of any of the 5 municipalities. We had great participation from our own council members. Councillor Usher was there. Councillor Cassidy was a speaker and participated in the full sessions, and a number of others, the mayor participated as well. So it was a great event, and maybe an opportunity for us to build on going forward, as is captured in the recommendations from the focus groups. So I trust that's a helpful summary. If you have any questions, happy to speak to them.
Councillor Usher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I have to congratulate and thank Mrs. Graham for the leadership that she and her staff contributed to this program. This program is very important from many perspectives. For me, it's part of I'm part of the committee, the standing committee at FCM that originates this program. And I've been a member of that women's committee since its inception 13 years ago, by the way. They didn't think that I was a woman. They just thought that I was a reasonable man to be a member of this women's committee. I just wanted you to know that. I have to say that just in case some of my colleagues might think, oh, they thought you were something else. No, I'm just kidding. You know that. Anyway, I think that it was nice that we were accepted as one of the 5 communities right across Canada to be part of this. I believe that we are one of 2 in Ontario. The other one is Sioux Lookout, I believe. I can't remember where the other 3 are. But I think that this whole program is an eye-opener. It's an eye-opener for me. And if it's an eye-opener for me, who have always been involved with this type of thing, I would think that it's an eye-opener for a lot of other people. But I believe that this is just the beginning, and I believe that we have to take this seriously and carry it forward from here, because what it identifies is that from my perspective, there's a lot of shortcomings. And we've really got to be bold. We really have to take the steps to move forward. And particularly, I think that we've got to make some intentional effort to include women in our governments, and I'm not talking about municipal government. That's up to the public and up to the people to run for this. But in our boards and commissions, I know that Ms. Graham said that we are there with respect to advisor committee, and you know that may be so, but it would be very interesting to look at which advisor committees, because I'm sure that there are advisor committees where it's short drastically. And there may be some skewed in other advisory committees. And I say this because even when we look at staffing and we look at the demographics of staff, we get this number. But this number is so skewed, it isn't funny. And each department, there are big shortcomings in individual departments. And if it is there, it's the same type of a thing. But this is the type of thing that I think this is the type of program that I think, and this is the intention of FCM, to encourage more women to run for office, and more specific in this case, for municipal government. So we need to be able to make this a little bit more public so that women out there can see that there are opportunities for them, and let them realize that, and the public, that you cannot win a seat unless you run. And that's what this, to me, is leading up to at some point in time. And that time for running is coming very soon, within the next 6 months. So I think that we need to make this public. We need to push it, continue to push it, continue to invite people, continue to make it whatever we can in all different forms, in all different avenues, so that young women out there and middle-aged women and all the other women will see that there is an opportunity that they could run for president. I know, I don't know about, so one of my colleagues told me that they spoke to a young lady just a day ago who is interested in politics. I have done this so many times. I even mentor some of them who are interested in, even if they want to run against me, I said, don't worry, just run against me if you feel that you are really interested in this, because you're not going to be elected unless you run. But I think that this is where this is leading, And the whole idea ultimately is to get 30% of the municipal seats across the country occupied by female by the year 2030. That may sound like a small task to us here in London, but you've got to remember that out of the 4,000 or so municipalities, there are more than half of them that are pure men. So it is a task on an overall basis. So I just wanted to throw that out. And again, I want to thank staff, particularly Ms. Graham and her staff, for the report. And I don't know what we're going to do after Ms. Graham leaves here, but I want to encourage staff to continue with this. We have to finish the task. And the task is supposed to be finished by 2019, all right? Or 2018. So we've still got a year and a half. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a really good report, mainly because I like reports with lots of data and information, and this has got lots of really good stuff in it, and it's got, I mean, more of this is, in my opinion, better. I like the recommendations, I like the process. When I looked at this report and I read it in juxtaposition with the report we just passed on the annual meeting calendar, it strikes me that, you know, one of the systemic issues we have is, I think, the way that we approach appointments to boards and commissions in this giant group all at once, which has now been scheduled for, I think, the day after inauguration is when we deal with it. With advisory committees, we left a little more time last time. I believe we phased it in February, and had some time to consider some more thought and separate those out. And I hope that as we move forward with, you know, implementing some of the goals in this, that the appointments to boards and commissions is something where I think we can change the systemic system in a really effective way if we put everything on the table, we consider, you know, throwing out the way we've used to do it and approach this in a different way. And I found it frustrating to have to, you know, choose the volume of people that we had to choose and the amount of time that we had to. I found that there were, you know, great people applying and you know, they may have applied for here, but maybe they're better there, and you know, could we put them there, but we don't have their consent, and trying to find and balance the talents with the skill sets, with the diversity that we want on our boards and commissions is a very difficult thing to do all at once in a very short period of time after an election. I also think that there's systemic issues with the timing in that people who may have been great candidates but lost the election sometimes are not really excited to step back up, you know, shortly after losing an election. I know that I did that in 2006 and was appointed to the library board, but I was really hesitant to do that because losing an election isn't a lot of fun, and you're like, do I really want to stay involved or not, right? People just basically marked on a ballot that they didn't want me. So the timing is really important. The way that we approach it is really important. And I think even the way that we approach the application is really important with, you know, trying to pigeonhole people into outlining their preferences in a very specific way in the application rather than looking at, you know, the types of things that they bring in general to the position of serving their community in a way on boards and commissions, and then having some flexibility to approach them and have a dialogue about where they might land if we have, you know, a whole bunch of great people applying for one board and we want to spread that out in a different way to kind of balance things across boards and commissions. All of those things I think need to be on the table. And I hope that that is going to be part of this work. I would expect it to be, is to tear down some of the systemic structures that we have and be open to a completely different approach. So even though we passed the annual meeting calendar just now and we'll go to council, I know that I'm certainly open to whatever suggestions on changing that process come out of this process and these recommendations, even if it means completely readjusting that system and the timing of it to lead to a more diverse outcome on our boards and commissions, which is identified as a bit of an area of deficiency in this work here. So thank you to the work and everybody who participated on it and all those who participated in the focus groups. I think without those voices, we wouldn't have the quality of information that we have now and the ability to move forward with some actual plans to create some change.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So question through you to staff. Hopefully I didn't miss it in here somewhere, but it tells us that 148 members were surveyed. but I didn't see how many surveys went out. It said that there was a smaller percentage that responded, but I was just wondering how was that represented, the 148?
Through the chair, so the total population that could answer was just over 400. So the response rate from our advisory committees was around 42%, and the response rate from the governance bodies of our boards and commissions was around 26%.
Okay, thank you very much. And the one point I might make, sometimes it's helpful to see not only a percentage, a ratio, but also a number. So for instance, if you've got 5 people on a board and 2 are women, it may seem low as 40%, but it's still within 50% plus or minus 1 person. So that can still be fine, or close enough. Sometimes the ratios would be more worrisome than other times. But by seeing the actual numbers, you can figure out whether or not that was the case. Thanks.
So through the chair, we did struggle. I mean, this is the first time we've done something like this, so we did struggle a bit with how we conducted the survey, but then also presented the data. Because it's voluntary, we didn't want organizations to feel like it was a review of how well they were doing on diversity. And so we made a commitment that we wouldn't report any organization or committee-specific results. We actually thought about just lumping them all together and reporting just one number, but felt that there were enough differences between the data for the advisory committees and the governance bodies that it was useful to show them separately. But very much appreciate the comments. As we do this over time, I'm sure we'll continue to get better at it.
Okay, thank you. And did we also keep track of the diversity of the people who applied? These, of course, would be the people who were accepted on it. But is that number available somewhere?
That has been raised before previously, and the clerk's office has spoken with the city solicitor's office back at that time, and it was determined that it was not advisable to do so. So to date, we have not had any voluntary disclosure of any demographical information.
Okay, thank you. Because that could, if we're worried about people saying, well, we didn't do very well in terms of diversity, if they simply didn't get a diverse population applying for the position, then that wouldn't really be their fault. And we'd be able to see maybe better where the trouble is, or where we need to act in order to have a greater diversity. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for recognizing me a little more enthusiastically this time. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Councillor.
I am so delighted to hear from you. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank Councillor Usher for the leadership he's continued to show in this area. And I want to thank Kate Graham for the hard work she's put in on this. And I also want to send a thank you out to Shauna Lukowitz of Women in Politics, because one of the criteria for being involved in this, and I think one of the reasons why London was a successful candidate, is because from the very beginning we included Women in Politics as a community partner. That was a criteria for inclusion. We had to have the community involved. It wasn't going to just be something directed from municipal council. So this is a rare thing at FCM for a program like this, for a city to get funding for a similar program 2 times in a row. So we got the funding for the Head Start program, and we saw this as a natural progression, a natural evolution from what took place during Head Start. And luckily we were able to convince FCM of the same. So I know the other cities involved were Sioux Lookout, as Councillor Usher said, and there was Montreal and Edmonton and Halifax. Okay, so those were, and with London, those are the 5 cities. So and again, I want to also point out that Councillor and former Mayor Joni Beckler was a really big part of the Head Start program. She really took it and ran with it. And then the last City Council provided funding to produce a documentary, a Made in London documentary, that was shown across the country and is available on the web for people to, and I know that teachers use it in their classrooms to talk about this lack of women representation at all levels of government across the country. It's named 25% because at the time that the documentary was produced, that was the average across the country of female representation at all levels of government, and we were stuck at 25%. FCM's goal is to get us to at least 30%, and it's not an end goal, it's a starting goal. So it's not, we only want to be at 30%, we'd like to at least get to 30%. So the funding that FCM provided to the City of London for this program is what allowed us to do this census. We knew that we needed a benchmark to start with, to see where we could go. And every individual city was allowed to set their own goals for this program and set up the program individually, so how they wanted to achieve that goals. We wanted to do something that was measurable, something that was within our power as a municipal government and a community group working together. And so that's why we focused on the agencies, boards, and commissions, because we have a role to play in choosing the people that sit on those boards and commissions, and it was something that we could very easily measure. And the census that we've done gives us a starting point. So at the end of the program, we will conduct the census again and see if we've moved the needle at all, and hopefully we will have done that. The census shows, as it's very clearly articulated in the report, that our ABCs are not representative of our population, as Ms. Graham said. And if they're not representative, if there's such a huge difference between what our population shows and what the membership of the boards and commissions show, then not every voice is being heard. We don't have a fulsome conversation. We don't have everyone at the table that should be at the table. And it's difficult to make policy when you're trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. We know from this council that we're better for having more diversity, and we can do better as a council as well to be a more diverse council. I know that's not within our control, as Councillor Usher said. It's in the control of the voters, but as this workshop showed, and as many people articulated in these focus groups and workshops, if they don't see their face at this council or at any other leadership body, then they don't imagine themselves in that place. They can't see themselves sitting at this table if they don't see their face represented in some way. And that was one of the really good things about the workshop, the 2-day workshop that we held. And a number of councillors came out and participated in that. I believe Councillor Helmer, Councillor Hubert stopped in. I think Councillor Morgan was there. For sure, Councillor Usher. But there was one section when all of the women councillors sat and shared their experiences with the group. And we got a lot of positive feedback from that, because even though we weren't necessarily representative from a diversity point of view, we allowed the women in the group to see that we were just normal, regular, ordinary people, and talked about our journey and how we got here to City Council. And I know a number of women came up to me at the end and said, I'm going to run for City Council, or I'm thinking about it, or I never ever thought about politics at all, and now I'm starting to think about it. So in that way, even though that's anecdotal and it's a small group in general, that was a really positive success to come out of that 2-day workshop. And as everybody knows around here, it's our diversity that makes us better, and it's important to increase that as much as we can. Some of the ideas for changing the process and the systemic barriers that Councillor Morgan talked about, the fact that there are no newcomers, either male or female, who immigrated to Canada more recently than the year 2000. That says a lot. So it says that we have to step up the way we communicate to recent immigrants, because it's important to hear their voice at the leadership table. And another thing that came up was the length of terms for the commissions, the boards and commissions. 4 years is a long commitment, and some people can't imagine where they're going to be in 3 or 4 years, and so they're hesitant to make that kind of long-term commitment, and they don't want to be a quitter. They don't want to say, I'll join up, but I don't think I'm going to stick it out for 4 full years. So those are some of the things that we will be looking at, and hopefully coming back with recommendations to council on how we might look at changing the way we recruit, the way we structure, the way we have the governance set up for the agencies, boards, and commissions. So, so far, it's been a really positive experience, and I think we're just going to keep on moving forward and hopefully come back with some really good recommendations. So, thanks.
Okay, on second round, I have Councillor Usher. May I make a comment before I go to second round, if you don't mind? I found this report really interesting. And I think if you do a deep dive into the numerics of it, I think the fact that we only had 28% of the potential respondents from boards and commissions respond means I want to take it lightly from a statistical point of view, but it still is a reflection of what is in our community. There's a number of things on page 22 of the agenda around outreach and application process, systemic issues, internal barriers. And I would like, and I suggested that there may be, what's the next step? Because the next steps here is rather a lightweight paragraph in terms of the report. And I'd like to see a little bit more robustness. So what I would be suggesting is a motion that gives direction to administration, the clerk's office and Ms. Graham's office to come back with an implementation report that takes the ideas here and actually moves it into what are the actions, and there's suggestions here, but I want to see something a little bit more deliberate and focused, because if we're going to move into 18 with a municipal election, now's the time to, and resetting the boards, which Councillor Morgan talks about, now's the time to get sort of the on-ramp, if I could use that, set. And not just around gender, but around all of the elements that are reported in this. And, you know, one ad or two ads or whatever in the Londoner, it just doesn't get us to where we need to go. Somehow we have to be much more targeted, much more strategic on some of these things. And let's not forget the school board. You know, that's part of our election process. And where do people start? So I would suggest that by the end of October, there be an implementation plan. I'd like it to come back to this committee. I think there's some value in working with both the Chamber of Commerce and I think Pillar Nonprofit in terms of how do we recruit, because this is a recruitment process. It really is giving people permission. Councillor Cassidy talked about people saw themselves in others. And, you know, it starts sometimes by being on a board of directors in the community. So some of those issues, I've had conversations with boards and they're trying to work on their diversity and they're struggling in the same way that we're struggling to identify and recruit those people. So very simply, and you know, I'll leave the chair if I need to move the motion. Sorry, I have to switch names here. Yes, that'll get us to where we need to go. And that there be a targeted strategy for advisory committees, that there be a targeted strategy for boards and commissions, there be a targeted strategy, I think, for council. I appreciate Councillor Usher's open-handedness. Come on, run against me. We'll all learn something, and it'll be a much more robust and conversation. And certainly, Ward 8's wide open, so there's lots of opportunity there. So I'll leave it at that. I'll look for a motion on that. And I'm coming back to Councillor Usher. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Between you and Councillor Cassidy, you mentioned a lot of the things that I wanted to talk on. Most specifically, I think that Councillor Cassidy really brought it up, because I want to make sure that people understand that this is not just the female, but it's a diverse female. And we've got a lot of smart, anxious people from the diverse communities out there. What we need to do is to bring them in. You may notice the chart on page 16. It doesn't show as though there's a whole lot of them, because the other population takes up a large group. But I always talk in these chambers about 16% of the population being visible minorities. And that's what this is all about, that 16%. It just spread out over a number of different ethnic groups. But I think that we need to bring them, because the whole idea about this program was to increase the representation of women, particularly women from diverse backgrounds, on the City of London advisory committee and governance bodies. But I think that we need to, at this point in time, we need to show those folks also that an election is coming up, and it's time they begin to think about running. So this is practically what you said. So I do agree with you that B is there, but I think that we need to make sure that it comes to us in a relatively short period of time. We can't wait until next year, March, for example. We need to get something back this year. So lastly, Mr. Chair, I want to make sure that we thank all the people who, I know it's in the report, and I know that Councillor Cassidy mentioned a couple of them, like Shauna, but this committee was made up of a diverse group also, which included Darcy Lacey, Mary Alakakos from the First Nations people, Vanessa Ampman-Smith, I think, is she First Nations? Smith also, and Yenny Medina, who is from the Latin American group, and a few others. Plus, Linda was part of the committee also. So I think that on behalf of the population out there, I want to thank them all for doing this. But I think that we need to move forward and come up with that recommendation. I fully agree with you, and I support this fully. Thank you very much.
Okay. Just a little add also, just, and I'm coming back to you, Councillor Helmer, is, you know, there was, did you say 5 municipalities across the country? I'd like to, you know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel ourselves. I'd like to hear what they're doing as well. So let's make sure we find out what's happening across the nation, because, you know, we don't have the whole market on great ideas, and some of them probably have some good ones that we could implement fairly quickly as well. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I'm glad to see where we're headed in the discussion. I did want to check in with our staff just around the timing. I think it's appropriate to set a time. I know the recommendation didn't have one, and I actually prefer recommendations that are a bit more specific. This is suggesting come back by October 2018. I just wanted to check in terms of the workload and whether that's doable, and if it is doable, if there's going to be a trade-off with other things, not to get into the details, but to make sure that it's possible.
Well, Kate, is it doable?
Kate's going to say it's doable, but she's gone Friday. And the city manager's name just got added up onto the recommendation here. So the bulk of the recommendations are actually to be implemented by clerks. I think in terms of late October, early November, that would be, we might be able to do that. I think it's important that you get it in for budget, because there may be some budget considerations that you want to consider as well. So to get it in before that point, which would be in November, I think would be appropriate. So we'll try our very best to hit that timeline.
Okay,
so
that's
do you want to deal with that?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I do want to bring up one other thing that I think we should tack on, and I hope it's not going to be problematic. I'm aware of an initiative by Mayor Muriel Bowser in the District of Columbia. She happens to be a Black woman who is the mayor of the District of Columbia. And she has initiated what was called a Formapalooza, This is a public workshop to bring people together to try and redesign and improve the forms that people are using when they interact with local government. A lot of the recommendations coming out, especially of the focus groups, are dealing with the application process and the application form. There's a number of recommendations in there, and I want to add a part D, which is to ask the city clerk, just a request, that she consider holding one of these public workshops along the same lines as what Mayor Bowser has done in the District of Columbia. I think it's a very smart way of engaging the community. When you bring in designers and people who have backgrounds in behavioral science and so forth, which is what they did, you can really improve the citizens' interaction with local government. The form is frankly, that's the touch point, right? You're filling out some form, and a really good form can be a lot better experience than a very bad form. And I don't know exactly how good this form is. Frankly, it's not my area of expertise. But I do think we have that expertise in the community, and if we bring people together to work on it, I think we can probably make a quantum shift forward in terms of how much better it's going to be. And that might help, frankly, knock down some of these barriers that people are facing when they're starting to fill out these forms. The language that we're using, how we design the form, what kind of information we're collecting, the experience of actually filling it out online or not online. I think those are all really important things. So I wanted to tack that on. I think it will be it's another undertaking, but I wanted to be very specific about what I think we should do on the form.
So you see that as a separate, like a D or a separate item?
Yeah, I see it there as a part E now.
Clerk Saunders, did you want to comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to bring to your attention that the clerk's office already has a number of these items on our list of things to do. We're already looking at the forms. We're looking at the advisory committee structures. So this is not new to us in the clerk's office. So, a lot of this came out of the striking committee recommendations as well from 2014. But this will certainly enhance what we're already looking at. So we appreciate the additional direction that's being given. From an election perspective, we're already planning candidates' information sessions starting in the fall of this year, where we will be opening up to the community to give them information on the election and advisory committees. So this is very helpful to enhance what we had already planned to be working on. So thank you.
Councilor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a problem with this. This is something that we should have advocated a long time ago. I thought that we did. However, at this point in time, with respect to this, I know that whenever something like this comes up, we always run to the Race Relations Committee or the DIAC. But I think we've got a good committee right here with this Diverse Voices for Change that could assist in that. And I'd like to hear what Ms. Graham says about this, if we would transfer this request through them first, and then they could make a recommendation to city clerk, because they're very diverse, they're very smart. I should say we are, because I'm a part of it too.
I think it's a good suggestion, Councillor. I think as long as it doesn't delay it, and it comes back in the same time space continuum, I'm okay with that. So I think it's a great suggestion. I actually assumed that would be part of it anyhow, because they're continuing to work, right?
And that's it,
and
exactly.
I think it's a great suggestion. So I just don't want us to put another step in there that slows it down.
But I just see this, Mr. Chair, as an extension to what they're doing, rather than putting it out there. I do accept what the clerk is doing.
The clerk is, from a municipal point of view, we have to find a way to implement it. And I think it's you do a feedback loop back to the committee and get their input, how to make it better. But at the end of the day, the clerk and administration have to implement some of this stuff. So I want to make sure that the locus of control for implementation is where it needs to be, and that they get the input from that group. And I think that's the intent here anyhow. Councillor Morgan.
I just was going to point out that the motion that I'm supportive of the Councillor Helmer added is that the clerk be requested to consider organizing. I mean, there's certain work that's been done, there's a time frame, and so it would be ideal, I think, to try to engage in a crowd sharing process of improving the forms, especially for the people who use the forms. I mean, that's the best people to ask. But it's certainly not restricting the process. I think the goal here is to have a functioning process well in advance of the need to use it on a mass scale. And I think that the motion is structured appropriately to provide the flexibility to do that, but indicate the intent of council, should it pass council, to engage in you know, some widespread, you know, knowledge sharing on how to best design a form.
Okay, folks, got motions of 4 to 5 parts to it. I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Thank you very much, and I'll call the question on that. Thanks for the good discussion.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, we'll move to item number 5. Councillor Morgan has pecuniary interest on that. So I'll look for a mover. Councillor Usher.
I'll move it, but I just want to I have a quick question. I don't know
Okay,
if anybody
quickly.
from the staff could respond to me. I just want to make sure that I understand what this is. Matthew, you going to answer this? I want to be sure that this is just, this is underground we're talking about, and it's a conduit, it's something within the conduit. Help me understand what we mean by this conduit pathway. When I hear conduit, I used to work for Bell Canada, and I used to put these things underground for the cables to go through. So help me make sure that I understand what we're talking about.
Thank you, and through the chair, you are correct. So what we have here is we have a city-owned conduit. And within that city-owned conduit, we have City of London fiber optic cabling. And in this case, under the elements of the joint use agreement, we will also have Western University fiber running within City of London-owned conduit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's exactly what I thought. I just wanted to be sure that I was not jumping way back in my other life.
You were a flow engineer. Okay, I'll call the question.
Motion carries 3 with 1 recuse.
Okay, we have an appointment to the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. The voting rep from the London Dog Owners Association. I don't think we need a ranked ballot for this one. I'll take a motion.
Motion carries 4-0.
Once again, we have more food and beverage. So on number 7, municipally significant event, take a motion. Call the question.
Motion carries 4-0.
I believe our final item is item number 8, which is the annual report from the Integrity Commissioner. And I'll look for a motion to receive it, and then we'll have some discussion. So I take that hand as the motion to receive it. There is a added public communication from Mr. Block as well. Okay.
Is the Integrity Commissioner here?
The Integrity Commissioner is not here. He was not asked to come. We can ask him to come at a future date of this committee, should you so desire.
I would desire that. I think that first off, I appreciate the report. I have some questions about it. I know there's some public correspondence too that would lead to some questions that the Integrity Commissioner could probably answer very clearly and quickly. I also have some questions about the other responsibilities in his portfolio about education and plans for that. I think it would be of value to have the Integrity Commissioner here before the committee to talk both about his report as well as talk about some of our needs moving forward from revising our policies, the education components of his responsibilities, and answering some general questions about the report. Talk about some expectations about the formatting of the report. I mean, this is a report that he's presented, but if it doesn't meet the needs of municipal council and committee, we want more detail, we want less detail. I think those are discussion points with the person we've hired to do this work. And it's difficult to have that discussion without the person here. So I don't know if that's a request that we have to make formally as a committee. If we need to do that, I'd be happy to do so. But it would be nice to have him here, both to thank him for his work and talk about the work ahead and how that would work. So I look to you on how we would do that.
Yeah, let me maybe be helpful. I think perhaps we could refer this plus the second report to a future meeting of the Corporate Services Committee, requesting that the Integrity Commissioner be present, and also that obviously I'm sure some of our other colleagues would want to join us for that occasion. I concur with you. As I read this, he said there had been no request for education, and yet that was actually part of the terms of engagement. And so you're absolutely right. The legislation's changing. We need to be forward thinking and prepared. And I think so there's, well, it's a good report. I think it's an appropriate referral. So I would frame it that way. And then perhaps we would not get into a great deal about it today, but save it for that day.
As we get the motion up, can I just make a comment? I think that given that, we pay for the time of the Integrity Commissioner, and it's certainly reasonable for him to come and be paid for his time because he's someone we've hired, perhaps we could schedule that at the start of the meeting so that we can deal with his issues or have a agenda very specific to that. I'm not sure that that's necessary. I think we can deal with other matters, but I think the scheduling of that meeting is probably appropriate to have him come spend his time very valuably here and move on to his other responsibilities.
I'll work with the clerk to have it as a timed item, whether it's right at the beginning or whether it's we do our nuts and bolts stuff and have him come at 1:30 or something to that effect. But that it's a specific time, we'll start as a timed item, okay? Yes. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question.
Motion carries 4-0.
I got it all?
You might want to ask if any members have any additional
Yeah. Any additional business, deferred matters? Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Helmer, Councillor Usher, all in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, staff.